Okay, we're all set. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals. You are here tonight because you have asked us to take an existing zoning rule and change it just for you. And we're going to ask you as you come forward to testify to tell us why you need it changed and why, if you don't have it changed, why it's a hardship on you to live with the existing zoning rule. I will remind you that if you are granted the variance, it stays with the property. And you also, if you're not granted the variance, you have the option of going to the Court of Common Pleas. That's why this is a quasi-legal procedure. And we have the best court reporter in Northwest Ohio over here taking minutes. So everything you say is properly recorded. So I will ask you, when you come to the podium to testify or to state your case, if you will please state your name and your address first, and please always talk into the mic so that she can get everything that's said. And sidebar conversations, she also has to record those. So we're not spying on you. We're just trying to get everything accurately recorded. And we've got the best one in Northwest Ohio to do it for us. The meeting will be run that we have 3 requests for variances tonight. I will read your request. The city will show the map and some of the information regarding your request. And then I will ask whomever is representing it to come to the podium, state their name and address, and explain why they need this variance and why not receiving it would be a hardship on them. When you're finished, if there's anyone in the audience that's been sworn in, they also may come and speak to it. Then the members of the board will ask you questions. And then we'll close the public hearing. You all stay right here in the room and we will discuss among ourselves our feelings on the request. We'll come back into a public hearing. We'll vote and you will know before you leave tonight whether or not your variance has been granted. Now I'm going to ask you, if you think you're going to testify, please stand now and raise your right hand. All righty. You swear the truth, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you're all officially sworn in now. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the March 9th meeting. They were all mailed out to. Does anybody have any?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting minutes have been approved. The first variance is Todd Overly on behalf of Pinnacle Plastic Products at 513 Napoleon Road. He has requested a variance to allow the construction of a 35-foot by 6-foot banner. This is only for 1 year on the south side of the building, which would exceed the 136 square feet maximum size allowed in the M2 General Industrial Zoning District. That's one variance he's asking for. It's the second variance he's asking for. A variance is also requested for the construction of a 2-foot by 4-foot directional sign on the south side of Napoleon, which would be on an off-premise sign located at 510 Napoleon Road. Heather?
Thank you. So under the zoning code, section 150.66, outdoor advertising in B, I, M, and S districts. In this case, it's industrial zoning district. Under section D, no outdoor advertising sign shall exceed the following limitation by district: M1, M2, or M3. The formula for allowable sign area is 136 square feet or the width of the building front times 1, whichever is less. In this case, you probably noticed that the building is quite wide. So the 136 square foot maximum would apply to the maximum size of a sign. So also under the same section of the zoning code, section 150.66, outdoor advertising in B, I, M, and S districts. Under E1, no more than 3 outdoor advertising structures shall be used for each business or structure and must be located on the same lot or premises. So in this scenario, he's not asking for more than 3 signs. They actually only have 1 monument sign right now, if you're able to drive by. Again, this is for the one across the street at 510 Napoleon Road, which we included a notification letter from the property owner allowing that approval to happen on their property. Here's an aerial view of the property. Tried to highlight the property owned by Pinnacle in red. Using pictometry, here's an image of the front of the building. Here is looking at one of the sides there. It's basically sort of a corner lot there. And then here is looking at the other side of the building where the railroad tracks run across there. And then here's the rear of the building. Here's some pictures of the front of the building. If you're heading there east on Napoleon. A little bit closer look there, approximate area of where he would like to hang that banner. Looking again at the front of the building, here's a side view of that existing monument sign. I know you can't tell there, but that's what's there now. And then here's a picture across the street of the approximate area of that green space where he would like to put that additional sign. And then here's looking west on Napoleon at the building at the front. And then here is the sketch that was part of your packet. I know it's hard to see here, but he circled there where that banner he would like to hang on the front of the building. And then an approximate location of the ground sign or the wayfinding sign he wishes to place there. We did receive one letter. Actually, I think it was two. Hold on here. I've got a lot of papers tonight to sort through. I provided you a copy. It is an email from Robert W. Maurer, one of the adjoining property owners. He writes the email addressed to me dated, where's the date here? Looks like okay, Heather, I am in receipt of your letter dated March 25th, 2002. That's attached and have no objection to the request. Respectfully, Robert W. Maurer, New Love and Bakeys, 224 East Wooster Street. On the back of that is where he copied the letter that we sent to him. And he also did a handwritten note, no objection to the request, Bob Maurer. And then a second letter we received was, again, handwritten on the letter that we are required to send. The letter was sent to REM Rentals LLC, 1045 North Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio. Again, there's a handwritten note dated March 30th, 2022. We have no objections. Steve Green, and then he lists his phone number. So again, those were the two letters we received. An advertisement was placed in the newspaper of general circulation as required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the administrative code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed first class mail to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedure requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you. Mr.
welcome.
Overly? Would you like to come to the podium and state your name and your address, please? Your home address, please.
I'm Todd Overly. I live at 1560 State Route 590 in the thriving metropolis of Burgoon, Ohio. Population 23.
And no traffic lights, right?
And no traffic lights. Go ahead.
Would you please state your reasoning for these requests?
Sure. So we'll start with the banner. Okay. So Pinnacle Plastic Products became an ESOP corporation, where the previous three owners, after 24 years, sold it through an ESOP through us employees. We are very proud of the fact that we are employee owned now. So the banner we'd like to put up says Pinnacle Plastic Products, an ESOP company that attracts more people to come that want to work for us. So that's why we'd like to put the banner up on the south side that people can see that we're an ESOP company.
Okay, and you understand it's for 1 year?
I do.
only. Okay. And your second request?
So the shipping sign, we currently have on average 3 trucks a day that stop on the south side. They pull off the side of the road in front of the building off of Napoleon. They walk over and they go, "Where's your shipping dock?" So our receptionist constantly every day, 3 times a day, has to tell the truck driver right around the corner. So I talked to Brian, I have a letter from, says we could put the sign up that says shipping this way for Pinnacle Plastic Products. So the truckers can come up because they all come off of 6 and then come down Napoleon headed east. So that way they don't have to stop. They can see the shipping sign right here, and then they can pull into our docks instead of stopping across the street, going back out. That's why.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this request? Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments? All right, we're a quiet group tonight. Okay, if no one has any questions or comments and no one's going to testify, I'm going to close the public hearing. And ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I guess we're going to come back into the public hearing, and I'm going to ask for a motion that and remember, we're asking for 2 variances on here, so.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded.
I'm sorry, who? Chris,
Chris made the motion, Bob
Bob.
seconded it.
okay.
Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Judy Annis.
Yes.
Hobie,
Yes.
Chris Ostrowski,
Yes.
Hess, yes. David Flieger
Yes.
and Bob Waddle.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
Your request for your variances have been granted, and thank you for coming up and spending
Oh,
a brief evening with us.
thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all.
You're very welcome.
Mhm. Hmm.
The second one is Shonda Willman from 411 South Summit Street has requested a variance to allow the construction of a 7-foot by 12-foot addition to an existing accessory structure already constructed, which would encroach 20 feet into the required 20-foot rear yard setback for an accessory building that is over 160 square feet in total size. Heather?
Thank you. So under the zoning code, section 150.90 rear yards, there is an exception that allows under section B2 accessory buildings. In this scenario, in interpreting this, you could go either way. If you looked at the pictures, you'll see that it was an existing shed and then they added to it. So, we basically called it larger than 160 square feet since they added to it, even though it has separate entrances. So again, just a matter of interpretation. We went ahead and went with the regulations for the exceeding the 160. So an accessory building that is larger than 160 square feet shall be no closer than 20 feet to the primary structure, 20 feet to the rear lot line, and 10 feet to the side property lines. In this case, they're asking for variance on the 20 feet to the rear lot line. It is up to the property line. Using pictometry, or excuse me, an aerial view first, this shows the property here. As I understand it, and I'm sure Ms. Willman will talk further about it, but they had started work on the addition prior to getting a permit. And I believe an adjoining neighbor had said, hey, did you get a permit for that? And she called right away and tried to get a permit for that. And we had found that it is up to the property line, and some of the roof area was over the property line as far as we could see. So they did correct that. So just wanted to give you a little bit of history on that. Using pictometry, here is the side of the property. You can see in the back there, the existing shed. And then here's the rear property. Again, the existing shed, the front of the property, and then the other side of the property. Here's a picture of the front of the house. This is looking towards the back and kind of see the top of that shed. And then here's a picture of the shed with the addition. Here's one side of that existing shed and addition. Here's the other side. And then here's the sketch, kind of hard to see here, but again, it was in your packet. We tried to highlight that addition. We did receive one letter from an adjoining property owner. Again, they took our letter that we sent to them, which went to SAG Investments LTD, 1045 North Main Street, Bowling Green, Ohio. And they did write a handwritten note on there dated March 30th, 2002. And he wrote, "We have no objections, Steve Green," and he listed his phone number. So again, that was the only letter we received. An advertisement was placed in the newspaper of general circulation as required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the Administrative Code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed first class mail to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedural requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you. Ms. Willman, are you testifying, or Ms. Willman, sorry.
Hello, my name is Shanda Willman and
You
I
can
live,
pull the, there you go.
Shanda Willman. I live at 411 South Summit Street in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Okay, now would you like to elaborate a little bit on your request and why you're?
Yes. So we started building this last October, kind of before winter hit, and winter went. And then about a month ago, our adjoining property behind us had asked us if we got a permit because we had a slight hangover about 12 inches over the fence line of the roofing. And so we were like, no, we didn't even think about it. So I came up to the building that next Monday and tried to file a permit and I couldn't. So I'm here trying to do the variance. The reason we want to keep the building is obviously for additional storage. We have a 1-car garage. So we were just looking to have some extra storage.
And you corrected the roof line, as
We
I
did.
understand it?
Yep. And I sent in pictures of that as well.
Is there anyone else here who would like to testify to this request?
Only question is, where's the rainwater going that's coming off?
Well, into our yard.
Chris, can you hear him?
It's hard to see.
But I
Mm.
would say before we changed it, it would have been going into the neighbor's yard, but now it's definitely going to ours.
Anyone else? have any
Well, how will
questions?
you do maintenance back there? Painting.
Well, we plan on painting the shed, but we obviously we're waiting for the weather to break because we built it at the end of last year, but
But is it right on the fence? Isn't it right on the fence?
it's butted right up to the fence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would be painting the front side and the back side
Mm.
to match our existing shed.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing, and does anybody have any, would like to discuss among ourselves?
My only real concern is I know it's dumping onto your property, but it's gonna run into the neighbors because I mean, it's right there on the line. That would be my only concern. Only thing I think would be remedy that would be putting a gutter along that back edge.
We could
Instead of-
certainly do that.
Is there room to put a gutter?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
When I looked at it, today,
I
I went out there and looked at it.
Dave, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to talk.
Okay. Yeah, what I was looking at was the picture. If there was actually enough room with the roof line versus fence height. And by all appearances, it looks like there is.
But yeah,
We would certainly modify it any which way in order to keep it. So
that would make me more comfortable putting a gutter along it. So it's just not dumping, but coming off the side and
And you're
back in the
agreeable
yard.
with that?
absolutely, anything we need to modify, we're more than happy to do that.
Anything else? Okay. May I have a motion, please?
I'm sorry, go ahead. So moved to include the gutter.
To include the gutter,
Yes. And I will second that.
amended to include the gutter.
Yes. Amended to include the gutter.
Got it.
Okay.
Mhm. Bob Waddle,
yes.
David Flieger,
Yes.
Ostrowski,
Yes.
Hobie,
Yes.
Johnson, Judy Ennis.
Yes,
Rose Hess, yes.
your variance has been granted with the amendment with the gutter. So
Thank you very much. Do I need to send follow-up photos once that's completed?
you need to get the proper permits from the city, so you might come in tomorrow to get them from
Sure.
Heather.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our last one is Nathan Wagner of Cash Wagner and Associates, and on behalf of the property owner Whitson Properties LLC, has requested a variance to allow the construction of a 288 unit multifamily residential apartment complex, which would provide 576 off-street parking spaces, 2 spaces per unit, rather than the required 904 off-street parking spaces, a difference of 328 spaces, based on the requirement of 1 space per 320 square feet at the parcel identified as parcel number B07-511-28123450 150000 on South Dunbridge Road. Heather?
Thank you. So under section 150.55 off-street parking, we have a table 150.59A that lists the use and under the zoning district. So in this case, the multifamily residential, and then the required parking spaces is 1 space per 320 square feet or a portion thereof. I did add or sent you an email because I should have put this in the packet and I didn't think to do that, but there was a copy of an email I gave you where I believe it was Mr. Wagner just clarified the square footage of each building. So we have that. So I just wanted to make clear for the record that he had said our buildings have a 12,048 square foot footprint and are 3 stories tall. So with 8 buildings proposed, the zoning code requires 904 spaces. So he did the math of that square footage, 12,048 times 3 stories times 8 buildings to get that 1 per 320. So that's where the 904 comes out. It turns out to be 903 point whatever, but then portion thereof means you bounce it to 904. So again, just want to point that out. I did give you a copy of that because I realized it wasn't in the packet till after we had sent that. So I thought that would be helpful. Here's an aerial view of the property that clearly right now it's just vacant land. So, and as you know, to the south there may be aware there is an assisted living facility being built. So that's not reflected on this aerial view, obviously. That's still under construction. Using pictometry, again, not a lot to see. It's bare ground there. So I just wanted to give you an idea of where it would be. And then for pictures, again, you can see that construction to the south there a little bit, moving the dirt and the getting the pond ready there. Here's another picture. As you can see, this is a rezoning sign. They did just receive the approval for rezoning as was agricultural. So now it's zoned R4, multiple family, high density. So that's why you see that sign there. And again, another picture there towards the front. It's about 20 acres, so it's hard to capture the entirety of that. In your packet was a little bit of a larger drawing to show their concept plan there and those buildings and then the parking.
I'm sorry,
Oh, yes.
the concept plan, I didn't count all the spaces. Is that the reduced number or is that the full number?
I believe that's the reduced number, but I would let their representatives
Fair enough.
point that out more clearly than I would. Thank you. Good question. Okay, so we did receive some additional information. I did some research. Mr. Flieger had asked me via email to look back at other parking variances for potential residential uses. So I went back to 1988, which is where our actual index starts. That makes it easier for us to research. Otherwise, we could do this for months because we would have to thumb through every single zoning board of appeals minutes since probably the 1950s. So we tried to do this in a reasonable way. And so I know this doesn't capture everything, but I gave you a copy of 2 different things. So first of all, I gave you variances that we found for residential multifamily for parking requests. And then there is another type of zoning district we have called special districts or S district site plans. Those site plans are actually approved by Planning Commission, and Planning Commission has the ability to modify the regulations. So I know that's confusing. So that's why I gave you both, because again, there are apartments that can ask for waivers for the bulk and density and parking restrictions. So I don't want to be confusing, so I want to make that clear that there are a couple different types of, I guess you'd say, waivers or variances. Again, I only looked at residential. There's been several commercial over the years. It just was really too much. And really it was about the residential requests from Mr. Flieger. So I don't know if you want to look through those, but basically I tried to explain, this is dated April 11th, 2022. I tried to explain the variances again versus the waivers, which I just told you about. And then again, the first one I found was in 1998, January 13th. It was 801 7th Street, and H. Richard Dunapace requested a variance to allow off-street parking on in-lots 2090 and 2091 in lieu of the 10 off-street parking spaces required to be constructed at 801 7th Street in conjunction with the 3-unit apartment building located there. The next one was March 13th, 1996. I'm sorry, I didn't mention the last one was approved and this one was approved. 824 5th Street, John Frobos requested a variance to allow the construction of a new apartment building at 824 5th Street, which will have 12 off-street parking spaces instead of the required 15. The next one is Greg Hoverson requested a variance to allow the construction of 4 parking spaces instead of the required 6 spaces. That was at 616 2nd Street, January 8th, 1997. That was approved. Wood County Village requested a variance to allow 15 parking spaces instead of the required 26 spaces at a proposed apartment complex at the northeast corner of Thurston Avenue and vacated Leroy Avenue. That's dated December 10th of 1997. That was approved. Pogemeyer Design Group requested a waiver for 3 apartment buildings for 18 units to provide only 26 spaces instead of the required 36 spaces as part of the S District site plan approval process. That was on the north side of Parkview Drive, January 6, 2003. That was approved. Holly Properties Management Company requested a variance to provide 4 fewer parking spaces than required at the end of Clough Street, November 13th, 2002. That was approved. A waiver was requested for Copper Beach Townhomes to provide 816 parking spaces instead of the 1,056 required spaces as part of the S District site plan approval process. Obviously, those are on Napoleon Road. They already exist. That was approved March 21st. That should be, I think, 2004. I don't know why I have 2022, except that was on my mind. And that was approved. And back then, actually, in that year, it was City Council who approved S District site plans. So it actually is an ordinance and the waiver is written into that ordinance. Lucy Hoverson requested a variance to provide 8 parking spaces instead of the required 12 parking spaces at 620 Second Street. And that was June 10th, 2009. That was approved. And then some of you probably remember Wallet Communities requested a variance to provide 202 off-street parking spaces rather than the required 358 off-street parking spaces. And that was off of South Main Street near the railroad tracks, kind of where Pagliai's Pizza is to the south, the drive would be. And that was June 9th, 2021, and that was denied. I gave you copies of each of the corresponding documents to go with each of the requests I just read. I just gave you a summary. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. I do know a lot of apartments were built here pre-1988. So I know it's not giving you a full picture, but I thought hopefully, Mr. Flieger, that helps you a little bit. But I apologize. There's no way I could have done before our indexes exist. It would have took a long time. But again, I'm happy to do more research if you need me to. That is why we are here. So we also, I know we've talked a lot about what we have going on with our new zoning code. And again, just providing what's going on. I know it's a kind of a precarious time for all of us because we're living in the current zoning code versus a proposed total rewrite of the zoning code, which we do anticipate to be out into the community, the rest of the document in the next month or less, and hopefully adopted by the end of the year. It's a very complicated process, as you all realize. We've been talking a lot about it. And, just to rewind a little bit, the update stems from our future land use plan from 2014 and our community action plan, which gives several recommendations about what we should do as a city to really have improvements in our developments and our neighborhoods. And so I do have copies of that. I tried to highlight where it does mention the city's desire and the community's desire to reduce parking requirements. We know bottom line, we want to propose reducing parking requirements. And actually the latest draft that I'm still reviewing does suggest eliminating parking requirements as far as the city telling a business their number. Obviously, this is all proposed. We don't know, how that's going to be vetted. But again, I wanted you to provide you that information so you're aware. But if you do want a copy of the future land use plan, just the parts where I highlighted recommendations to reduce parking and the community action plan, I hope that is helpful. But the community action plan is the most recent document. And that one specifically says in R4 multiple family and R5 districts to encourage walking and biking, that the high parking requirements can make new housing prohibitively expensive to build. And nationwide trends also indicate a growing preference for ride sharing services in lieu of personal car ownership, especially among younger populations. That was the most recent, I thought, thing to mention or recommendation that would definitely apply. So again, I know we have a lot going on, and I just appreciate you, understanding, the current code and the regulations, and then of course, what we're looking to do. So as far as the adjoining property owners, we did not receive any notifications in writing or phone calls from those that were required to send letters to. I did give you a copy of an email that we received today, Wednesday, April 13th at 12:27 p.m. from Jeff Dennis. And he writes, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, I'm writing regarding the variance request submitted by Cash Wagner and Associates that you will be considering this evening. The applicant is requesting a variance to build 328 fewer parking spaces than would be required under our current zoning code. You should grant this request. As I'm talking to people in our neighborhood, some of the most frequent complaints I receive are about housing affordability, requiring developers to adhere to outdated mandatory minimum parking requirements increases the cost of new development, commercial and residential, substantially. This in turn increases the cost of rent and opening a business. Another complaint I hear frequently is that many of our neighborhoods are experiencing various issues related to overcrowding as a result of older homes being converted into multifamily units and or bedrooms being added to increase occupancy, enforcing outdated minimum parking requirements and thereby making it less affordable to build new units makes upscaling residential homes to meet demand a more attractive option for real estate investors. This exacerbates the problems related to overcrowding that many in our residential neighborhoods report experiencing. It should also be noted that this request would be wholly unnecessary if made several months from now. There is, I think, universal agreement among my colleagues that our mandatory minimum parking requirements are outdated and in need of serious reform. You don't need to look far to find justification for that position. We have seas of underutilized asphalt in every corner of our city. This inefficient use of land is not the product of developers seeking to needlessly maximize their expense. It's the product of our outdated laws. The result after decades of adhering to this policy is large swaths of our city and many others throughout the United States that now border on blight. Please consider this as you make this decision, which will affect the character of this development and the surrounding area for many decades to come. Sincerely, Jeffrey J. Dennis, Bowling Green, Councilman at Large, 345 North Grove Street, Bowling Green, Ohio, 43402, lists his phone number, and then there's a web page there. An advertisement was placed in the newspaper of general circulation as required. A site notice was placed at the site. The other notices required by the Ministry of Code were posted in the proper time and location. A letter was mailed first-class mail to the tax mailing address of the owner and adjoining property owners. Therefore, all the procedure requirements for the hearing have been met.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner? Please state your name and address.
Nathan Wagner, Cash Wagner and Associates, 402 East 13th Street, Jasper, Indiana, 47546. I am the engineer for the project and here representing, I guess, the property owner and developer for the project. The primary reason we're asking for the variance is based on history. This developer is an apartment developer. He doesn't develop other things. He doesn't do commercial strip malls. He doesn't do, duplex type rental housing. He doesn't do anything but a multifamily apartment. So, and he's done several throughout the Midwest. I mean, he's got probably somewhere around 200 apartment communities. So he's got a history and knows his product, and he knows, what parking he needs for his tenant and his clientele. The demographics, the tenant that they go after is a young professional. It's not a student. It's not necessarily a married couple with a lot of kids. It's the younger professional that's moving into town for a short period of time. Maybe they know they're only going to be here for a year or 2 or 3 and don't want to buy a house. Maybe they can't afford a house. Maybe they're going to, use this as a stepping stone before they buy their house, but that's the tenant they're after. They're not after somebody that has a lot of kids. Not that they can turn them down or do turn them down, but it's just their history is they don't have a lot of kids either. So their market research is why they're coming to Bowling Green is they know there's a lot of new industry starting to come to town, and there's a lot more coming that's going to be on the way, and they want to be here and have rooftops and units before those come to town. I mean, I think everybody recognizes that you're short on units, and like a lot of people, you're not unique. I do have just a small sample of comparison sites, just different towns that shows what their parking rates are based on your ordinance, which is based on a square footage. This equates to 3.14 spaces per unit. In other words, for every apartment unit, we would be required to put in over 3 parking spaces. The normal or the average it seems to be right at 2 units per space. The lowest we've seen is 1.5. 1.5 is the lowest we would ever go. And what happens is the more units you build, the lower the number of the need. In other words, when you're building your duplexes, quadplexes, a small number of units, you probably do need 2+ units for your tenants, visitors. But when you start getting into the 100-unit large projects, they start averaging out and average where you only need 2 or less units, or I'm sorry, 2 or less parking spaces per unit. You know, our ideal is probably in the 1.7 to 1.9 parking spaces per unit. Most of the units are 2-bedroom. We have a handful of 1-bedroom units. The rest are 2-bedroom.
What is the apartment count?
288,
288. How many 1-bedrooms? How many 2-bedrooms?
8 1-bedroom, 280 2-bedroom. No 3-bedroom, no 4-bedroom. No 3-bedroom, no 4-bedroom. So I think if I did my homework right, the variance that was denied last year, the request was for less than 1 space per bedroom. And we are at or above 1 parking space per bedroom, which would be, you know, two spaces per unit. And to answer somebody's question about the site plan we have, that shows what the variance request is, the 2 units per unit, 2 spaces per unit.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this? Sir, were you sworn in?
Yes. it
Okay,
was.
okay. You want to come up and state your name and address, please?
My name is Brian McMahon. I'm the president of a company called Danbury National. We're headquartered here in Wood County in Perrysburg. Just quick background, we've been involved in real estate for almost 50 years. We spend a predominant amount of our time working on economic development in Wood County. Some of you are probably aware of the fact that Wood County is now experiencing the fastest job growth that we've probably ever experienced in the entire time we've been in business. One of the things that's happened is that Bowling Green is becoming recognized as one of the preferred places to live. And in reality, Bowling Green is the capital of Wood County. You're the county seat. You are strategically located as to where most of these jobs are going. You are considered to be a safe community. You've got a good balance of services in this community. You've got plenty of good retail, restaurants. And what's happening is I had breakfast this morning with Katie Thompson, your economic development director. There are a number of projects that are actively looking to locate in close proximity, if not in your community itself, some of which you're probably aware of because there's a new project that's under construction on the easternly part, I think, of the community now that I'm not sure they have decided to make themselves public, but they will shortly. So one of the things that's happening is there's a need for housing. If we want to attract these young professionals, the reality is they can't afford a home. They can't afford a home now, and they're not going to be able to afford a home shortly because the interest rates are going up. I mean, almost every night we listen to the news and hear about inflation. Well, inflation is real, and it's really having an impact on the construction industry because the cost of materials are going up significantly. Just lumber itself in the last several months has gone up by over 30%. So one of the things that I think is in front of you tonight is whether or not you defer this. If you defer this, there's no question that the cost of this project will go up. And if the project goes up in cost, then the cost of housing for those people you're trying to attract in this community will also go up. I think this is a good company. We have worked with this company extensively in at least 6 other locations in Northwest Ohio. One of them happens to be about a mile from the campus of Owens Community College. There was never any concern about what impact the students would have on the mix of people that were renting those units. I think the economics will pretty much preclude students from basically trying to overpopulate an apartment, like I think some of the concern might be. So this is a good company. As Nathan pointed out, they don't build and sell. They own all their product. So they maintain their apartments better than companies that might otherwise build and sell them. So as somebody that is involved in economic development, I want to tell you that I think this is something that will complement your community, and it's something your community needs.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you for your kind words about Bowling Green. We all agree with those. Is there anyone else who has any comments they'd like to make? Sir?
Adam Scaff. I live at Middleton Trace in Bowling Green, Ohio. Most everyone that has spoken already has kind of mentioned what I was going to mention anyhow, so I'm just going to briefly summarize some of the stuff. I work for the city, but I'm here as a citizen who's lived here over 18 years and love living in this community. And I want to see it grow and prosper. And I think that there's a good balance between being too aggressive and being too conservative. And from what I've seen and from a little bit I've talked to the landowner and the developer in this case, I think this is a good project for the city. As mentioned by, I think the engineer that was up here, the developer knows better than we do, right? They know based on prior experience how many spaces they need. They're not going to build a $30 million project and not have enough parking. They know better than we do. And as just mentioned, time is money. I also build houses. My business partner and better half is right there as well. And material costs are through the roof. The 30% number is accurate. We're currently building 2 houses now, and I can tell you, the longer this waits and gets delayed, there's going to be pressure on the developer to either raise prices or potentially pull out the project. I know that you guys denied a previous apartment complex on South Main. I understand why, but as you may know, as I drove by South Main today, that project is still not happening. And so that's lost investment. And I understand, again, there's that balance. As mentioned, this balance, I think, is better for what they're building. As some of you know, I'm a police officer for the city, and so I work a lot at night, and I see these apartment complexes, and I will be the first one to let you know that in almost every single one of them, there is an abundance of parking that does not get used. I understand why they're there, and some of the larger apartment complexes, for the vast majority of the time, are half empty. Also just mentioned new businesses. On the East End, there's a 254,000 square foot FedEx distribution center that's being built out kind of by VTech, out next to Meyer. Those people are going to need somewhere to live. VTech, one of the city's largest employers, every night at 11 o'clock, they get off work and they get on the highway and they leave and they go to Perrysburg, Rossford, and everywhere but Bowling Green. As mentioned by Heather, vehicle ownership is declining. Every study says that younger generation driving less, owning less cars because of vehicle ride services, ride sharing services. And due to the pandemic, a lot of places have learned that people can work from home and there are less 2 and 3 vehicle households. Also mentioned changing to the existing codes. Over the past year and a half, I've heard about these codes changing. I've sat through several city council meetings. I've not heard any pushback on the parking regulations being reduced. If you guys listen or pay attention to the city council meetings, it's been talked about extensively. And it's one of the things that they've said in the past has hurt us in our growth is some of these existing codes. And that's why they're working hard to change that. We say we're a green community and we want green space. We got a beautiful new Worcester Green, and we talk about the environment. And when we go to build a house, we have to make sure we don't have too much paving. So there's lot coverage so that we don't have asphalt and concrete everywhere. That's what that looks like. This is aesthetically pleasing. This is, I think, what the citizens have said they want. The last thing that I'll say in closing is this went before the full city council and it was voted 6-1 in favor of this project. Now, they didn't get down to how many parking spaces there were, but the entire city council voted on this. There was public hearings and people had the ability to speak. No one mentioned anything about what's going to happen with parking. I think they put their trust in city council that they're going to make the right decision. In this case, they voted 6-1 in favor of this project.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Romanet, did you want to? Speaking of city council.
Good evening, Greg Robinette, 1501 Cardinal Road, Bowling Green, Ohio. And I'm here tonight to give you one council member's perspective on this issue. I'm here to support the requested variance to allow 2 parking spaces per unit at that planned apartment complex on South Bend Bridge Road. And as you know, we've been talking about this. We have begun the process of updating the entire zoning code for the city of Bowling Green. Although we haven't begun to address the issue of street parking as part of that process, we will. And we'll be doing that very soon, as and Heather, summarized our goals, timelines. But in my opinion, many, if not most, of the off-street parking requirements in our current zoning code are excessive. As we move forward with drafting changes, the off-street parking requirements for inclusion in our new zoning code, I will personally be advocating for rethinking our requirements and a reduction of those requirements, especially in multifamily developments and commercial developments. Based on my conversations with community members and developers over the past few years, I'm convinced that there's also broad community support for easing the off-street parking requirements in Bowling Green. And if you grant this request, I believe you'll find that it will track with the changes that we will eventually make to the zoning code in the near future. And as I'm sitting here tonight, looking at that chart there, it occurred to me that that's going to become, at least from my perspective, a very good and important case study in how to proceed after we get this behind us, because it's going to provide a perfect example of what a successful development can look like and what the very current view of parking requirements for such developments are. So I just will close by simply saying I support this requested variance. I think it's important for the project, and I think it's important for Bowling Green.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment, Mr. Harrell?
William Harold, 1030 Conneaut Avenue. First, and I try and do this every time I address you all, and thank you. I go to a lot of meetings, and the job you do is you have to be diligent every minute of the meetings, and I appreciate you doing that. With respect to this, the parties that are involved in this project have stated that they're willing to work with the city, and I think this would be a good faith effort on the city's part to listen to what they have in terms of their rationale. I'm assuming that when somebody rents an apartment, they have assigned parking places. Is that true? Okay, so someone could move in and have 3 cars and not see that as an issue. Okay. In terms of the demographic that they're aiming for, I think it would be very beneficial to have a multi-use path that entire length of their property. And I think that the prospects of having a multi-use path to hook up to the multi-use path that's already in existence crossing I-75 would appeal to those that you're hoping to rent to. It would decrease the need for as many cars, and don't know how much, but it would certainly decrease that. And if there are less parking places, there would be more room for them to be able to use some of their property for the multi-use path. So given that they're stated on the record desire to work with the city, given the demographics that they're aiming for, reducing the parking to where it's still 1 parking place per bedroom, would all move toward the direction of reducing the number of parking places for this project. So that's my perspective. I certainly would not tell you how to vote because you take your responsibility seriously, and I trust how you vote. But that's just the perspective I have based on what I've heard from them in the past.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make?
I had a question for Nathan. Okay. I was just curious about something that you wrote in your request, that you were requesting a variance, and it was your desire to have fewer parking spots. And this has to do with your past experience with this type of development. I was just curious what you meant by that.
Well, I mean, one is the handout I gave showed the history of this developer.
Mhm.
Only One is the history of other communities and other
Okay.
zoning ordinances. One is the history of this developer and knowing his properties and how they're used and how many vacant parking spaces they have in every community. You know, they get feedback from their managers, on-site managers on what needs to be upgraded in new properties. And, you know, we asked specifically about this project. Is parking an issue?
Mhm.
And it's never became an issue. If it's an issue, it's just because there's too many parking spaces loaded at one end of the project versus, so in other words, there's not enough parking spaces, say, at one building. But overall parking count is never an issue for us.
This is pretty stark, the data in
Yeah.
here.
And
Yeah.
there's more examples. I just went through and grabbed a handful and other apartment developers are the same way. When you get to a larger number, that's why they don't do assigned parking spaces because there's
Mhm.
enough to go around.
Interesting.
Eduardo, did you have a question?
I did. On these, one of the examples that you gave us, are those centrally located in close proximity to like the downtown areas or close to transportation or stuff like that? Because where you're going to be kind of out and about, out of the way.
Similar situations.
Mm.
There are different examples. They could be out. I don't know if we have the one on there from Kansas, but it's a military base. There's nothing around it. There's no transportation. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Kansas is not here.
Okay. Lawton's very similar. It's a Fort Sill project.
Any other questions, comments? I would like to make a comment. As someone who worked for a store in retailing, and we went in and remodeled a lot of stores. When a builder or a developer comes in and voluntarily gives up parking spaces, then you know that they know what they're doing. Because
Yeah.
that's not something that most people say, oh, I don't need this, I don't need all these parking spaces. I mean, usually they're out there fighting for them. So
Right.
thank you for looking at it and saying, hey, we don't need all of these.
Mhm.
Now, looking at the resident parking, what do you guys allow for visitor parking?
It just gets absorbed in the 2 per unit on that scale. What happens is because of the demographic they're after, you're not going to have everybody there at one time. You know, and not every unit's going to have 2 cars. Not everybody's going to have 2 cars plus visitors at the same time.
Yeah, I've done property management for 20 years and been president of the Apartment Association for Ohio twice, so
Yeah.
I get parking.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? If not, I'm going to, did you
Well,
have something?
I'd like to ask Heather a question, or maybe you know, and maybe you don't. It is interesting that Copper Beach, their number was reduced by 24%.
Yes.
Do we have any data that, you know, there are problems out there?
Well, it's actually interesting. This was a unique ordinance. They basically allotted in the ordinance that Copper Beach could be relooked at in the future. And the city could request that they make modifications if the parking did not work out. And again, that was several years ago, but to my knowledge, nothing was ever,
That's
you know,
interesting.
considered an issue. So,
That's a big reduction.
yeah.
23 some percent.
I also want to better understand what's the hardship that we're granting it on the variance. The variance that was granted, yeah, hardship.
Well, hardship is you lose amenities like the pond and green space. You create more impervious surface, which creates more stormwater control and stormwater, you know, more chances of pollutants getting in your stormwater from excess parking or excess parking lots, the heat generated.
Okay, anything else? I'm going to close the public hearing and we will discuss among ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Questions, comments, anything you want to say?
No, actually, all my questions got answered through the process.
This has been
Feel
a
the
tough
same.
one for me. I agree with the parking regulations. But a 36% reduction seems like a lot. And I know being in property management and president, one of the top complaints for a long time, like parking. Is the point where lack of efficient parking where you want the parking. happening or building, not necessarily property. But, then we've heard a lot about, how the code's going to change, but our charge is to enforce current zone. Our charge is not to second guess it, charge is not to anticipate where it's going. Although I would think we'd all like to. And that's where I'm having the problem. Charged to enforce current zoning the way it's written, not that.
Hey, anything else? Anybody have any other comments?
Yeah, I do. I accept that. That's a reasonable concern. However, you have to also take into account that every circumstance that's presented to us is different and has a reason for its presentation to us. And you look at the quality of the presentation and what it's providing versus the strict measure of code that doesn't know when it's being written exactly who it's applied to. So, as I look at, like you do, and all of us do, we do see those seas of blacktop that are not utilized, and we realize that we're in error in our history. So, I think that we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. I was also looking at, the waiver that Copper Beach got driving out there, and there's ample parking out there. It seems to be in the evenings.
I know several people that live there and they've never complained about not having enough
They got
parking.
a 20% reduction.
26%,
A bit
yeah.
further here. So I'm kind of on the fence. I'm close to parking. I think the bedroom count along with parking is a good balance.
Well, hopefully you'll come off the fence in time to vote.
We'll see. I do like the project, though. It looks great, at least on paper. It looks great.
Okay, may I have a motion, please?
I will so move.
Is there a second?
That was Hobie.
Yes.
All right, will the secretary call the roll, please?
I will.
Call Chris last so we can get off the fence.
Put him on the spot.
I'm going up the ladder. Bob Waddle,
Yes.
Flieger,
Yes.
Ostrowski.
It's a tough one for me. I believe it'll pass, but I'm gonna vote no just to show that there was some dissent and there was some concern in the request.
Hobie,
Yes.
Ennis,
Yes,
Hess, yes.
request for your variance has been granted. Welcome to Bowling Green. Is there any other, we have some lobby visitation. Is there anyone here who would like to visit with us for a while? Hearing none, may I have a motion for adjournment, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.